What Do You Do is a jobs and careers podcast dedicated to demystifying careers we don't know much about and exploring unique approaches on ones we think we do. I'm Adam from Dandelion Video Production, and each episode I'll be having honest conversations about what these careers actually involve. So if looking to hire a specific service, figure out what your next career move, or just want to have a nosy about other people's jobs, this podcast is for you. Today I'm here with Chris Haywood, who's a winemaker at Astley Vineyard. Great to have you here, Chris.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate talking about this with you.
Yeah, I don't particularly know much about, but I'm very interested in finding out more. So we'll start off with what does a winemaker do?
Oh, I mean, the assumption there is that I'm only a winemaker. So the business I work for, Astley Vineyard, is a family business, and so my parents own it, and there's only 3.5 of us. I'm full-time, my parents are full-time, and then my wife is part-time. And so even though kind of the unique element of my job is that I am a winemaker, it's not the only thing that I do. So I can talk about winemaking, but really my job kind of encompasses basically just owning a business and kind of just being the wine nerd of the family. But kind of winemaking, as is in the title, ultimately I just make wine, but it's a very long process from picking the grapes in September, October until when they're released around, maybe July, August. I'm doing loads of different jobs in there. It's not just I do one day's work and it's done. And there's the dog coming in, if you don't mind. And so making wine takes a long time. It's a very long, gentle, thoughtful process. It is from before you pick the grapes, literally deciding when to pick them, the initial processing, the whole kind of maturing process, and then the blending and releasing. It's a very kind of complex, interwoven, multi-layered job, which is kind of half art and half science, which is kind of why it appeals to me. There's loads to winemaking. It is, it's a 9-month process, and what's the joy of my job is that every single moment, every day is different, every year is different. So I could literally run you through the whole year's winemaking if you want, but you're interested in hearing the breakdown of it, or do you want the high level stuff?
I suppose the high level would be good, because like you say, it's quite an involved process. We don't need to go through every little tiny part of it, but just sort of, I guess, the major steps from even planting the grapes, I suppose. I mean, this might be a lot of stupid questions.
No, it's good, and that's the thing, is that the wine industry is quite snobby. It's quite hard to get into, and so it appears quite unfriendly as an industry, and so people tend not to ask questions because you don't want to look stupid, as you just said. But at the same time, it is quite complicated, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. Ultimately, it's a weird job that I do, but it's a job like any other. To go through all of kind of winemaking very kind of high level, you need grapes, and you can either grow them yourself or you buy them. And growing a grape takes a long time. It takes 3 years from planting to get your first grapes. So, and a year of kind of preparing the land. So you're 4 years in of working and planning your business, and that's when you get your first grapes. Then you need to pick your grapes, and every grape variety is different. Every grape variety comes in at a different time, and this is where the vineyard manager and the winemaker splits, is that they kind of want different things. My dad grows the grapes throughout the year. He does his best, and he has opinions on when to pick them, but the say will ultimately be mine most of the time, because I'm the one that's going to be processing them. So you choose when to pick your grapes, and that's a balance of sugar and acidity and health as well, kind of balancing all these things together, because they all matter kind of in context. You pick your grapes, then you squash them to get the juice out, and this is when you start to develop flavors. And then you are kind of letting them settle, so it's very cloudy at the start, and you're trying to let it settle out, get a bit clearer. Then you're fermenting it, which is adding yeast to turn that sugar into alcohol. Then winter is about kind of just letting them just sit and just relax and kind of just get comfy, basically. Wine doesn't like to be rushed. And that's where we're at now. The next stage is going to be filtering, so to get rid of any extra kind of yeast particles or kind of just solids in general. Then we will be blending, and blending is just sitting down with kind of little syringes and stuff and kind of just playing mad scientist with all your grapes. So you're just blending it, and it's literally this plus that plus sugar. Does it taste good? And you kind of look at the range and the business side of it, and then it's bottling. And so from September, that covers September until maybe June or so, and then it starts again. The thing with the wine industry is that it's seasonal, so it just starts again and you just keep going. It's just going around a circle, but the circle is different every time, which is kind of the interesting bit.
Absolutely. I was going to say, just judging by the amount of time it takes for them to grow and the amount of time it takes to in that process you just listed as well, the 9 months. How do you cope with the sort of the ambiguity or the weight, I suppose?
Yeah, I know the weight is massive. Yeah, that is kind of one of the more challenging aspects of the job. It depends on your personality, but like the weight and the pressure is significant, right? Because I always say that in the vineyard, we've got 7,000 vines. If my dad makes one mistake, it's one mistake in 7,000. It's quite easy just to kind of disappear and average out. I take those 7,000, there's 7 tons of grapes, and I put them into 12, 15 tanks. So if I make one mistake in 12, that's suddenly a lot bigger problem. So that is tricky. The complexity is the kind of the fun bit. And I like to say that technically anyone could be a winemaker. I really genuinely believe that, just making wine, very simply, anyone can do it. Whether you're any good is a different question, dealing with the job and making good wine. And so, like, the ambiguity, the complexity is the bit that is kind of, I find that I'm good at, that I find really interesting. It's hard because imagine if you've got a job and you create your product, your framework, and then you just rely on it. That's your product. I've made it, I put it out there. But with grapes, I do it, and next year it's different. I can never make the same thing. Every year, my raw product completely changes. And so my customers want one thing, I'm learning things, there's things that I want, but my raw product is completely different. And so being flexible and kind of seeing all the variables kind of move around is kind of the hard bit. And that's how you do get good wines and bad wines. I think a bad wine from kind of inexperienced winemakers is having a goal but not looking at how you get there, just that your goal doesn't move despite everything else moving. And so what I've got better at is kind of having a vague goal but moving the goalpost when things move around and kind of just letting things be and kind of taking my time over decisions.
What you're saying about having this framework, but not having the framework, but having the aiming for a goal, but not ensuring how the raw material is going to get you there, actually does remind me of videos that I've made throughout my career, because you intend to make a type of video, you know what the goal is, but the raw material of what the people are going to say in an interview is completely you can't control how good a person's going to be to interview. You can't control what they're going to say. You can try your best to nudge them in the right direction, but like ultimately you've got to make what you have with the pieces that you have, haven't you? It's like,
yeah, I would just get bored if it was always the same. And I the way I see it is that I think my customers would get bored if it was always the same. We've kind of nurtured our business for my customers to expect that it will be different. I say that, if you like this wine now, take this wine because it might not exist next year. And the positive is that I might make something different and more exciting next time. So I think it's kind of taking this kind of inconsistency and a potential negative and showing it as a positive and being consistent with the idea that, we know what we're doing with those issues. But we always, at the end of the day, it's a good product. It just might look different or taste a bit different.
Absolutely, you're right. It is a very interesting way of framing it as well, because like this might be the only time this ever happens, and do you want to miss out? Like the FOMO is a very strong marketing driver, isn't it?
Yeah, and I studied. My background is that I used to be a musician. I haven't always done this. I used to kind of be in a band. I worked in the music industry, and I studied business at university. And the marketing side and the business, it is kind of in the back of my brain because I studied it, and the whole fear of missing out and how we market ourselves. But I don't do it in an aggressive, manipulating way. It is just that embracing the small boutique business element where it is a one-off and there is limited supply, and I choose my words, but I'm not faking it when I say, when it's gone, and it's genuinely gone. I've never, there's some wines that I've made twice in 8 years and people are still asking me after it, and I made versions and some are better than others and all sorts of bits. So it's kind of, in the early days of setting up the business, it was how I looked at where we were going and all these potentials and trying to weave it in a way that suits us and that our customers understand about, what our direction is.
No, absolutely. I recommend that approach as well, because like it could be, you could push it a few steps too far and it would go, oh, this is it, this is your only chance, but be more honest about like what you actually, the reality is. is just as effective without being pushy or manipulative, like you say. How did you go from that background to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so from kind of like teenager, my goal was always to be a musician, and I took it like as seriously as I'm doing my job now. So I was a really kind of hardcore musician trying to do all of that. But music is kind of, nobody makes money. You hear about the 0.1%, not everybody else who failed. And so it's always a hard industry. And so I took it seriously, but I always knew that I would call it one day and say, enough's enough. It's a hobby, not a career. And I got to that point, kind of early 20s, kind of like post-university, a year or two after that, thinking, okay, I think I need another direction here. And I've always loved food and drink, just from a family background. There's just a family culture of trying things, talking about it, going for like nice things, not just volume and stuff. And so the family kind of culture was always there. Personally, like, my palate, genetically, physically, I was predisposed to that, I think. Like I worked in music because I hear things well. I listen to music, I kind of really engage with it. My job now is that I just taste well, I smell well. So I think my senses are just, it was always obvious to me that my senses were good and there's ways of using it, basically. So I kind of moved away from music and I said, okay, I'm going to do something in food and drink. What am I going to do? So I kind of took a little, bottom rung of the ladder, take a little break, go easy, and I just started doing basic, sell it. I sold brownies at a market stall in London for a while, just learning kind of customer stuff. So I enjoyed it. I like food and drink, and I was cooking and stuff. One idea was maybe do I become a chef and do like a market stall or something. But a job at Harvey Nichols came up in London, and this was in their food hall, and I went, okay, good, I'll give that a go. And I got the job, which is cool, and it's really interesting. So I went from like very basic job to very quickly, having a job that I could start to build a career from potentially. I was in the food hall, and it was interesting, all sorts of amazing stuff around me, customers, crazy celebs walking in, I met like Kit Harington, I met Alan Rickman before he died, all sorts of stuff. But the wine shop, if you've ever been to the Knightsbridge Harvey Nichols, the wine shop is amazing. It's this kind of a really small little box room filled with, floor to ceiling bottles of wine, and the place had a really good like work culture. The boss was nice. There was amazing stuff there, and I just liked alcohol. So I kind of, on a whim, I went to the manager and said, I like wine. I'm interested in working here. I don't know anything about it though. I know good wine from bad wine, but that's it. Can you give me a job? And he said, yeah. So I moved there, and I was, 24, 25 at this point, and it clicked. My life just went, I think I know what I'm meant to do now. It was music, and now I think it's alcohol. So I was a really boring Londoner. I didn't kind of go out. I didn't spend money. I wasn't just interesting. I like my job. I really want to nail this job. And so I got close to getting a buyer position, like a promotion, but I didn't have a qualification. So at this point, I was getting married. I kind of needed some money, and like retail's hard. So I said, okay, I'm going to get this qualification, leave retail, and let's see. And this exact timing was when the vineyard came up for sale. And my parents came up to me one Christmas and said, we're thinking about buying a vineyard. Are you in? And I went, okay. So I've always had this entrepreneurial side where I want to do something for myself. I was open to the idea of anything. I knew it was going to be wine. It was close to where we lived. It had the support from my family. It had a place where we can live and work. So it's fate. I really like the idea of fate and things fitting together, and it was just a why wouldn't we moment.
No, it's very powerful. Like, it's I'm not. I don't particularly believe in fate. I believe in making the most of what situation is there. But like, it's a really interesting perspective that you've got on that. It did all time very well, didn't it? And it's like,
it's both, and it is making the most of it. It was saying yes to the opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. So I'm not discounting that. I'm just saying I didn't expect you to start discussing fate at like 9:15 in the morning. So I'm gonna go instead to what was the qualification that you needed? Because I can't handle fate right now. Sorry, it's just a bit too early in the morning.
Yeah, it's fine. It is early morning. So I got something called the WSET. It's called the Wine and Spirits Education Trust. And it's kind of like, so there's two sides to wine education. One side of it is kind of like sommeliers, and the other side is what I've got. So the bit that I've got is about learning about grapes in general. It's about law. It's about the process. It's about very general wine knowledge from the side of vineyards and winemakers. The bit that I don't have, and people assume I have, is sommelier. And sommelier is focused on like kind of serving and kind of restaurants and food pairing. I'd love to do that, but I'm not a qualified sommelier. So that kind of gives you a solid foundation in wine. And there's different levels. So like I recommend this to everybody. If you're interested in wine, WSET, incredible. Level 1 is easy gift to give to somebody, 1 day's worth, and you will know more than most of your friends. Level 2 is I work in a pub or I work in an okay restaurant and I need to know quite a lot about wine, but not perfect. Level 3, what I've got is I work in a wine shop and I know lots about wine from all around the world, and that's kind of the top level of everyday humans, I'd say. Above there are other levels, but then you are kind of like PhD level or literally like world expert. So I could go up and I kind of want to, but it's a big effort, a lot of money. And I don't need to generalize. I need to specialize. And so, yeah. And I also did a very quick winemaking course in Plumpton. So like go from theory to practicals. So just a very quick couple of day course. That was it. And just take kind of how do you do it? Here's the pump. Okay, let's put it together and stuff. So yeah. And also just being a nerd, sitting on my phone, reading about things. That's kind of what. And again, the physical element of being a good taster really helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose as well, there's like there are a lot of elements to wine that most people don't even consider that you pick up on that course.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard talking about this because I really hate the idea that being a gatekeeper about trying to make it scary about this implication that I know more, so I'm better than you, and I hate that because the wine industry does it so much and it makes it so unfriendly. But at the same time, you're right that there is a lot that people don't really realise about it, and I think that's the fun bit. And what I like to say is anyone who is very strongly confident about wine is lying to you because there's so much to learn. It's one of those where the more you learn, the more you realise you don't know. It always goes deeper. And so it's things like the weather. You just say on paper that, of course, the weather affects it, but like, what happens when it's just a rainy year? You've got a terrible year, in a textbook, how do you grow bad grapes? And you've got that year. How do you make good wine from a textbook bad year when everything goes wrong? So the weather is just absolutely out of your control, and yet you've still got to try to do something with it. And it's things like dry January. How do you do a business when people don't drink for a whole month? And it is the tourism side as well, where on the one hand, I'm a farmer. I sit there and I'm kind of just snipping away outside, or I'm kind of cleaning my winery. It's a part of it is a very grubby physical job, but people come to me expecting that lovely, charismatic, educational wine experience, and luckily, we are the people in the business that can do both. But people forget that we're farmers and we're trying to offer a nice experience, and it doesn't always match like that. So there's loads of bits, and that's the joy. So if you like wine, go into it, speak to people, and I think it's a wonderful industry.
No, it's a very good attitude to have because, like you say, it's easy. I guess the preconception is that it is a gatekept industry. Is like, oh, we know better than you, and because you don't know that, you don't like wine. But of course, anyone can like wine. It's just, I think you've said it in your presentations. It is a drink. It's meant to be enjoyed, and the more people know about it, the more accessible and enjoyment they'll get out of it.
Yeah, I think like ultimately the most important question is, do you like it? It doesn't matter if you understand it. It doesn't matter you can say anything about it. Do you enjoy it? And that's how we approach blending, is that we don't hold ourselves to really silly rules that only wine nerds will care about. Enjoyment is the main thing. And if we can get there in a very kind of elegant way that people care about, that's great. But is it a good drink? That's the only thing that matters to me.
Absolutely, that's a good philosophy to have. In terms of those different circumstances, like such a wide variety of circumstances you have, what are the key decisions that you're making along the way of producing wine?
It's literally non-stop. The winemaker at Night Timber, he phrased it like, the job of a winemaker is to look at 1,000 crossroads and to know that all of them are right in some way. And that is the interesting bit, again, that's what defines a good or a bad winemaker, is kind of seeing every outcome and seeing how that branch leads to another branch, leads to another branch. And it's about kind of looking ahead and thinking about, how do I get to my destination with all of these choices in front of me? So, I mean, the main things is good grapes. You cannot make good wine from bad grapes. And so how do you make good grapes? And hopefully you've got a vineyard manager that's kind of good. But as I said before, sometimes the weather goes against you and you can't do anything about that. So it is the moment of harvest. Again, going back to harvest, it is you're trying to always harvest the ideal. You know what the goal is, but when you don't have that, what are you prepared to sacrifice, basically? And the vineyard manager is always about health and quantity, whilst the winemaker is always about quality, and they absolutely do not always match. And so there's been moments where my dad is begging me to harvest grapes, and I'm saying, I do not want those grapes. They are not ripe enough, or they are not healthy, or I want to wait. And so that balance of, because you can make wine from less healthy grapes. You've just got to be more careful, and I just know that the flavors won't be as pure. So it's just looking ahead to, what does that mean with the making, with the blending? Do I have components to work? Because wine is a blend. It's a blend of all your grapes and all your tanks. And so if one of your ingredients is slightly off, it doesn't matter if all the rest are good. And so sometimes I've accepted that, okay, we need to get it in. The other tanks, the other grapes will kind of hold their weight, will kind of lift it up a little bit. So harvest, and yeah, it's the big thing about harvest is you can't go backwards, and it's also a single moment in time. Compared to beer or spirits, you can make them in batches, and you can always perfect the process. You don't like it, you change it again. But with wine, it is a single thing. You can never go back from it, and so you have to be really happy with your choice. And so, yeah, harvest is a key one. Other bits, like yeast, again, it starts to get really boring and technical here, but it's kind of, how long do you let the grape juice, the skin sit in the grape juice? You're extracting flavour, and literally an extra hour could change it, could ruin it, for example. Then you're going into, what yeast do you use? And I've got really boring yeast catalogues, and I've got 200 choices. Which one do I want to use, and stuff like that? How long do you let them sit? So there's loads of micro decisions that can work as long as you look at the effects in the future. It's all about how things move together is my job. It's not just isolated decisions.
And that's where the mad scientist comes in, where you sort of have to experiment and see what works.
Absolutely, yeah. And some of my craziest wines, my favourite wines, my kind of most cult wines have been crazy experiments, crazy one-offs, just mistakes. So a really good story is that in my first year of winemaking, it was amazing. 2018, golden year for English wine. Top 2 vintages in the last 8 years. 2025 being the other top one. And one of our grapes is called Z grape. It's a pink grape, and we have made a dessert wine with it in the past. And so that's what I wanted to do. So I left them really late, really high sugar, really thin skins. I said, I'm going to make a dessert wine. And so I picked them and I soaked them, as I said earlier, to get some flavour. Now, Z grape is a pink grape. It's kind of like a pinky blush rose colour. And it started to leach some colour into the juice, and it came out pinker than I thought. And I went, okay, well, pinkish golden dessert wines exist. I'll accept it. And then the fermentation. Now, one of the nightmare situations in winemaking is a problem fermentation. It doesn't go well. And so this one, it didn't start, just nothing, just really slow. And I was starting to worry. And to make a late harvest, what you have to do is you have to kind of stop the fermentation halfway through. You get some alcohol, but you leave the rest of it as sugar. So you're meant to kind of just control your fermentation. This one, absolutely out of control. Zoom, went really, really hot. And it fermented drier than I wanted. So I had a pink and less sugary wine than I wanted. But I went, okay, well, it's still fine. There's some sugar. It tastes good. The flavours were crazy. It was not like textbook wine. This one tasted of balsamic strawberries. And again, that's a nice dessert, but not very winey. So again, I was like, okay, I think it could work. And then I followed it through, and I kept it there. I was never quite happy with it, but I went, okay, I can work with it. Blending, because I didn't have this experience of flexibility and kind of just being open to ideas, I knew that, I want to make a dessert wine. I will make a dessert wine. I will force it through. It doesn't matter what the grapes want. I will make it do it. And I did make one, but it wasn't natural. The best wines kind of make themselves. They click into place. And this one felt like it was being forced to put a mask on. And so we kind of tasted it, and it was acceptable. But I showed it to my family and my wife and everyone. And my mom and wife said, well, it's just not right. It's pink. How about we make a rosé from it? And something just exploded in my brain and said, why didn't I think of this earlier? And so basically I got to use wine that was going to go to waste. I got to make something better that had loads of character. And people to this day still talk about that first vintage of rosé. And it was a terrible, loads of mistakes just dealt with well. And so that's one of my biggest learning curves was just, you can do anything if you just keep your eyes open. And it's kind of the same with business. It's the same with wine. It's the same with kind of like just, what businesses you deal with in terms of selling wine. It's just being flexible. And I think that's what being a small business allows for, being kind of family owned. You do it all yourself. You can make these really fast decisions and it all ties in with your ethos. And I think that's what we're very mindful of with kind of doing our business, is that everything is aligned and everything is kind of as you'd expect from us. It might be a bit interesting. It might be unexpected in some ways and expected in other ways. Chris did something weird, but I thought he might. So that's what I like.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, but yeah. If you're all on the same page, I guess it still works out. So it's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So, who is your ideal customer or wine drinker? Or if someone felt intimidated by wine, what would you say to them too?
Oh, okay. So customers, I try not to have one single customer in mind, because I think that's a bit unfair, because I kind of, as a wine drinker, I like all sorts. Some people have that one drink or one thing that they like and they always go back to it. And they go back to it because it's safe and because it's reliable. I'm not that person, where I will always try the thing that excites me, that's different. I try never to have the same thing twice, just because I know I've had that experience. I want to have a different one. And so with my wines and with my customers, I kind of want to reflect that, where I've got something for everybody, where I have affordable wines for the everyman who just wants to drink wine or support local and just have that gateway experience into English wine. And I focus on those wines as much as my other ones. And in a way, my gateway wines are the most important. Our Seven Vale is our house wine, the only wine that we promise to make every year. And we put loads of effort into that, because that is the first wine people normally experience from us. And so it tends to be one of our best wines, in terms of value and just in quality, because it's meant to appeal to everybody. So I've got gateway wines, and those are important. And then I've kind of got like classic mid-range wines, which are very textbook in terms of, you're a wino and you like your Sauvignon Blancs. Okay, what does Sauvignon Blanc taste like? So I try to have like kind of more textbook examples of wines, ones that are kind of good quality, not so scary, and kind of just a reasonable price point. And then I've kind of got the ones at the top, which are more interesting, more exciting, more expressive. So ones that like the grapes want, or the vintage wants, or I've got a crazy idea, or things like that. And they might be more focused on the restaurant side of things. So in terms of like my customer, I really try to appeal to everybody, and very genuinely, not in terms of like a clearly logical, business-minded, get money from everybody, but it's more that I appreciate, I acknowledge, and I am all of those drinkers. I've got my everyday plonk for when my kid wakes me up at 5. I've got my nice glass of wine for when I've got a good meal, and I want my weird stuff when I'm feeling like it. And so that is part of it, where I try to welcome everybody personally. There's some things I don't, like for example oak. Like I'm not a big oak fan, and so if you love a big oaky wine, I'm not for you. But I don't mind that, because it would be me putting a mask on and making a wine I don't love. I love all my wines in some way, and so I think my style is aromatic and light, delicate, kind of fruit focused, and I like acidity as well. but I try to consciously have wines that will suit other people, like softer, sweeter wines as well. And what was in terms of getting into wine, was it? How'd you get into wine? Was that the other question?
Yeah, what would you say to someone who was just getting into it?
Yeah, I would say try more. Try to get away from that wine you have all the time. Try to drink less but better. Take your £7-8 bottle of wine, and can you take it to a £13 bottle of wine and see if there's a difference? And try to be mindful of, where's it from? What grape is it? What have they done with it? What tastes different? So start to drink consciously rather than just kind of seeing it as like a drink to get drunk on, or just kind of letting it pass you by. So the active drinking and active thinking is a good way. Then start to read about it. Find some nice websites about it. So there's one called Wine Folly, and it's a very easy, approachable way to learn about regions and wines and grapes. And then go visit vineyards, for example, or go to wine shops and start to kind of speak to nerds like me that kind of show you approachable knowledge, for example. And it just hopefully get deeper and deeper and deeper, and that knowledge excites you. So you can do wine, and things like the WSET I said earlier, they're a great way. But really, drinking interesting things and thinking about it is the best place to start, I'd say.
No, absolutely. And the point you were saying earlier as well, I can ask, I suppose there's a certain amount of satisfaction on having your stamp on all these wines, and knowing that you love them and you want to share them with people.
Yeah, it is immensely personal, and that is what makes it stressful. The fact that we do it ourselves, and they are our choices and our positives or our mistakes. So yeah, the stress there is big, but you're right that that's the thing I get from my job, is the satisfaction that we spent a whole year growing those grapes, and then we spent all those months making the wine, and we made them for people. And when these wines, people give them to their friends, they go to weddings, they show them off to their friends that live abroad, and they bring them here for a tour and stuff. It is that kind of that direct, seeing the smile on somebody's face, or choosing to spend more money on my wines than cheaper supermarket wines. It's all about the satisfaction and the kind of it's the creative side. Again, I am writing songs with my wines, I'm making wines. It is a reflection of the year, of myself, of our business, of kind of English wine as a whole and things. So there's so much more to it than just, I made some wine, I'm going to just make a price. There's all this thought that goes into it. Again, as long as you enjoy it, that's all that matters. But from my side, that's what I'm putting into it, and those are my customers. And I think that's why people like us, is that hopefully they see and hear these things.
No, amazing. That's and well, your ethos of just breaking down the gatekeepers as well. It's a very what do I want to say? It's a very sort of positive way to not only experience something that people haven't experienced, but also understand what went into it, and how much passion is in it as well.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I do this kind of, I really hate I want to break down this gatekeeping, because I've been on the receiving side of it. Just being my age, so I'll go to events, and me and my dad are there, and they will always defer to my dad because they assume he knows more, and he hasn't done the course, he doesn't do winemaking, he knows much less than me, but they defer to him. And so I find that really frustrating. And when I do wine tastings with people older than me, that's fine, but it's always like I'm trying to get over a hurdle with them, I'm trying to prove myself, and I find it really frustrating. So yeah, anybody can learn about wine, anybody can know things, and it can be fun, and it can be silly, and it can be highly technical and highly luxury, all those things, and it depends who you're speaking to.
No, perfect. Thank you so much for joining me and explaining, and helping me to understand all there is to know about winemaking as well. I just have one last question, and that is, what's one bit of general career advice that you would give to anyone?
Oh, good one. I like this. For me, I think it's passion. I think that you can do any job, but you do well in a job, you stand out, your career progresses when you're passionate, when your customers or your managers see that you care. And I think that it's both internal passion and external passion. It is the passion that makes you follow up on work and research when nobody's watching. It's what you do when nobody's watching is how you progress yourself individually. And then it's also how you how you say it, how eloquent you are, how you describe it, how you pass on that knowledge. And I think people want to learn and people want to feel passion. And the thing I've heard most at our vineyard tours and our vineyard is I've never met somebody so passionate. I'm not trying to big myself up, but like I find it frustrating that passion is so hard to find. That why is it so abnormal that people love what they do? And so I wish people did that more, is that you show that you like it and it's clear that you like it and there's a real heart behind it. So passion is the main thing. Like, yeah, evoke that, foster it, and yeah, all the passion.
No, I completely agree. That's a very good answer. Right, thank you very much for joining me today, Chris.
Appreciate it. No, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for choosing my weird and wonderful career. I hope it inspires somebody out there.
No, it's definitely inspired me, so thank you. If you'd like to know more about Chris and Astley Vineyard, then please visit astleyvineyard.co.uk. Next week, I'll be talking with Craig Smith to find out exactly what an education and development specialist does. Thank you.